Get your balloons and party poppers ready because it's the triumphant return of Tiny Deltarune Details. Hooray, the beloved fan favourite series is back. The series where I'm slowly picking apart every single minute detail within Deltarune and theorising about it. This game will be a husk of its former self by the time I'm done with it. Today we're focusing on a small detail, but one that actually shows up fairly often throughout the game. Something that most players, including myself, probably don't really pay much attention to. This is a box. Okay, so it might actually be quite a big Deltarune detail. Or it might be a Deltarune detail that may or may not have significance depending on where the narrative goes. But that doesn't fit nicely into a logo, so it's a tiny Deltarune detail. I've basically had some stray thoughts floating around my head for a while regarding this box, about what the nature of this box and similar elements in the game that are related to it actually is. I want to keep the focus on the battle box in particular here, because I could totally go on so many other tangents about all the other various parts of the game that connect to it, because there are quite a few. So what can we glean by just looking at this box? Well, it's green, and it's a box with solid walls. It can move or change shape during battle, but for the most part, it stays in this shape in the center of the screen. We also see that each time we need to dodge attacks in the game, the soul is physically ejected from Chris and placed into the box. We can presume this because it's the same animation that plays when the soul exits Chris in the light world and in battle. The soul is actually taken out of Chris's body, which is even more obvious in this battle where Susie is the one fighting and the soul actually comes from the top right hand corner of the screen, because that's where Chris is. So those are basically the main elements I want to focus on here. The fact it's green, the fact it has solid walls, and the fact that the soul gets ejected into it. It being green, and specifically this shade of green, is very important, I think. If you've been around the Deltarune community recently, you've most likely seen the influx of theories surrounding the colour green. Go ahead and watch some of these videos if you want the full laydown, but the general conclusion that they mostly all come to through citing countless pieces of evidence, so many pieces of evidence that it honestly doesn't seem like it could be a coincidence, is that our favourite boy Gaster is actually green, or at least that he is heavily related to the colour green. This is one of those things I could go on another tangent about. I even sort of semi-planned a video out about it before a lot of the other videos came out and basically just said exactly what I was going to say. But just as a very quick refresher, we have the save menu before the end of chapter 1, that is green, and clearly Gaster is who we're talking to. We have the strings that are attached to Spamton, which are the same shade of green. We have the fact that Gaster was likely related to Sans and Papyrus. Green would go quite well with red and blue, wouldn't it? RGB. There are so many other examples though that just watch the other videos. So overall, the battle box being green, specifically the same shade of green as the pre-chapter 1 save menu, is very notable, I think. It means that this box is very likely linked to the metatextual and Gastery elements of the game. We can presume that Gaster, or whoever it is using something to connect us, the player, to the game. Whether that thing is a device, or a machine, or a magic haddock, doesn't necessarily matter right now. All that we need to establish for the rest of this video to work is that there's some mechanic that he is using to connect us, the player or the soul, to Deltarune's world. And by the way, I don't necessarily believe that Gaster created Deltarune's world. I kind of feel that could break the immersion. I think we're supposed to see the light world as more real than the dark world. Could lead to you just not caring about the characters in the light world. Therefore it creates the idea that anything outside the light world is inherently more real. I think that it's more that Gaster's magic haddock is just what connects us to Deltarune's world, the world that already existed. Gaster just found a way to insert us into it, but didn't create the world from scratch. That's the interpretation I like narratively the most. Toby Fox is a good writer, so I imagine he would do something that is narratively satisfying. I'm not him, and I imagine he probably could do something narratively satisfying with the other way of thinking of things. Obviously, we don't have the ending yet, and I'm not a genius writer or anything, so there's probably some things I haven't thought of. But anyway, that's my current interpretation that we're sticking with for now. Whatever interpretation you have about the nature of Deltarune's world doesn't necessarily matter for the rest of this theory. It's just the idea that the soul has somehow been inserted into this world, and our control over it is something that has been added onto this world. Because we've seen that uncontained, our soul pretty much has unlimited reach and is able to go wherever we please. In Noelle's house, we have no limits apart from the walls of the house. We can pretty much go anywhere we want, like gravity doesn't seem to affect the soul really. We can interact with certain things, and I imagine if the door was open or something, we probably could just escape and go anywhere. The soul has unfathomable power and ultimate control. So it makes me wonder then, is this box a feature of Gaster's device that is designed to restrain the soul and limit its movement? Imagine if the battle box wasn't there. During a battle, after our soul was ejected from Chris, surely it would be able to just cause all sorts of chaos. Surely in that chain of events, we would be able to go ahead and interact with Susie or Ralsei or the enemy even. Doing that could lead to them being possessed by us, right? Instead of Chris, or a whole host of other unfortunate circumstances. Think about the Spamton battle, for example. The whole battle, Spamton wants the soul, so if we were able to just go over to him, then he has it. So I wonder, to prevent these sort of catastrophic events from happening, Gaster devised or engineered this battle box to restrain us in these moments, to allow us to focus on our specific role during these fights of dodging enemy attacks and protecting the party. I wonder this box existing could give us some insight into Gaster's motivations here, or maybe just some of his character. We already get the idea vaguely that he is curious and scientific. He wants to know things. He likes performing experiments. To what end, we currently don't really know. But if what I just said is true, or at least close to being true, then surely Gaster would have some motivation for restraining us in these moments. There has to be some reason for him wanting to prevent these catastrophic things during his experiment, in order to ensure things don't go too far off the rails, perhaps. Clearly, he has an endgame of some sort that has to do with the word Deltarune. The battle box is one of the ways he's using to sort of keep us on the track that he wants. Although, I mean, he doesn't seem to care much about the weird route, so maybe he doesn't care that much about how much power we exert onto this world. It could simply just be an experiment of curiosity to him, a scientific experiment of morbid curiosity. But even then, in the weird route, the battle box still exists. We're still constrained when we battle, even though we've exerted a lot more control over Chris. So we still don't have that ultimate freedom to go and be the soul, disconnected from any character. So it could be that Gaster simply just doesn't care about the events of the weird route in particular, but is happy that we have just progressed the story to a certain point. In either route we take, it's still, from Gaster's perspective, getting him closer to whatever his endgame is. So perhaps he is still a bit uncaring of the actual events of this world, which, you know, could say something about how unfeeling he is, or maybe lacking in empathy he is. Maybe he doesn't care if people are harmed in this world. He just wants to get whatever he wants out of it. You know, if you do listen to some of Gaster's lines of dialogue, he does sound quite obsessed, doesn't he? So that's one idea. Another idea, what if this box also exists to to make the game fun for us. Well, you'd probably think that's obvious, right? The battle system is like the main gameplay system in Deltarune, but I'm not really talking about this from a gameplay perspective. I more so am talking about it from a story perspective. So imagine for a second Deltarune without the battle box. Battles still play out as normal, but there's no dodging phase. That sounds pretty boring, right? That takes away arguably the most fun part of Deltarune's battles, the box, and perhaps other battle elements as well. They are things that have been deliberately implemented by Gaster to keep us engaged and interested. If he, for some reason, needs us to accomplish whatever his goal might be, it would make a lot of sense for Gaster to try and make this experience as pleasing and engaging as possible. This idea sort of lines up with the Snowgrave route, right? In theory, if Gaster's watching us play the Snowgrave route and we are still persisting and going along with it, then surely from his perspective we still must be getting some enjoyment out of this. We're still engaging with the world, but perhaps just not in a way that he expected. To him, as long as we're engaged and continuing to go along with his experiment, then that's fine. I think Gaster's symbolic role in all of this is that of a game developer. Not that he created Deltarune's world, but he's created this experiment. He's created some parts of this experience. This idea also lines up with something I theorized about Ralsei in the past. I think his intended role in all of this was literally to be the tutorial NPC. He's there to make sure that we, the player, know what we have to do and understand the mechanics of this world. That is why Ralsei has been bestowed all of this knowledge that he seemingly doesn't want. Perhaps Gaster is the one that set Ralsei up simply as a guide. All of these ideas line up with the concept of Gaster trying to make the experience of Deltarune as enjoyable as possible in order to keep us on board with his plan. As for what that plan is, I couldn't begin to speculate because we only have 4 out of the 7 chapters, but I think no doubt we'll learn more about what his intentions are in future. The box and the battles as a whole could also be a part of the reason Chris needs us in play here. They wouldn't be able to battle, or at least not as easily, without us there. We as the player play games and are familiar with how RPGs work. For Chris, these battles would be real, arduous affairs. Us having this outside perspective might actually help Chris and the gang to get through these challenges easier. Playing an RPG is not the same as being the main character in one. And I think it kind of goes along with this idea that I like, that we and Chris won't always have an antagonistic relationship. I think there will be moments where we have to work together and that we help Chris. Chapter 4 already showed us that in parts. And if you think about it, every battle in the game, we're helping Chris out by dodging the attacks and hopefully making the best tactical decisions. And who knows if Chris actually remembers what happens after we reload a save. You know, if we die in battle, does Chris remember that happening? If not, then from Chris's perspective, we've been the perfect guide throughout this whole game. From Chris's perspective, we've won every battle. If you think about it, all of the angel symbolism surrounding the soul and the player makes sense. We are sort of a guardian angel throughout this adventure. We're helping steer the main characters throughout the narrative and battles as well. We're helping them to dodge attacks and make the best tactical decisions. I really like the idea that we are not evil. Chris doesn't hate us. Maybe they do sometimes, and maybe they especially do in the weird routes. I think the relationship between Chris and the soul is one of the most interesting ones. Also, it's very interesting to me that pretty much the only battles that mess with the battle box in terms of moving it around or even just getting rid of it entirely are Jevil, Spampton, the Knight, and Gerson. It would line up with these characters having more knowledge than the average Darkener about the nature of the dark world. Perhaps goes along with the motif of freedom, or perhaps is granted to them by the power that the shadow crystals give them. Because when you think about it here, here. What is the knight doing in this moment when they cut the battle box in half? The battle box is a user interface element. How are they interacting with a bit of UI? Surely the only way they do that is if they had some sort of power that's above that of the average person in this world. And one other last thing about this box that I've always found interesting is how literal are the bullet patterns? Are they like interpreted for us? Are they sort of just visual metaphors or interpretations of the attacks being done by the enemy? Or is what we see on screen literally what's happening in the game world? Like, do bullet patterns actually exist in universe? Some characters do reference things that happen in attacks, so it's not outside the realms of possibility. Noelle mentions that she gets hit in the face with a tornado after the battle with Birdley, for example, so it's clear that some elements of these battles are actually happening to the characters, but I don't know if this is something that actually matters, to be honest. Like, sometimes gameplay mechanics have to be abstracted in some way. Even in a game like Deltarune, where a lot of what's happening on screen is literal, I don't know if there will ever be a definitive answer as to what bullet patterns actually are, and I don't think it actually will matter that much to the story. Sometimes if you think about every single line of dialogue in this game too much, the whole thing can fall apart. That brings me to my overall question for this video, after all these little tidbits of information and things I've noticed. Overall, I'm not sure if this detail about the battle box or all the things I've said in this video are groundbreakingly important to the overall story. I just thought it was something neat that might give us some extra insight into some small parts of the game, but I don't think it like solves Deltarune's narrative or anything. So I guess after all, it is a tiny Deltarune detail. Oh, look at that, a nice happy wrapped up ending. Lately, a lot of the things I've been looking at with Deltarune have sort of been feeding back into some of the theories that I already have, but I never go into these videos with the idea that I must make them fit my previous theories. But I think the fact that they do often end up fitting those old theories could lend more credence to those ideas. And I've talked about before how much I think Gaster cares about different parts of the game. This is basically just another bit of evidence that can be used to support those ideas. That's what this Tiny Deltarune Details series is all about. It is about looking at the tiny details and seeing if there's anything in them. And even if there's not, we've had some fun time theorizing and coming up with our own headcanons. Because isn't that what it's all about, you know? Even if none of these theories are going to be correct, I don't think that matters. I think it's just fun to think and discuss and come up with ideas of characters. Gaster could totally turn out to be the opposite of my interpretation of him. I'm totally okay with that being turned on its head, as long as it's like written well. I don't think it matters. But let me know what you think. Is what I said today crazy, or does it make sense? If you want to help support me in the channel, there's a few ways to do that. They're on screen now. Patreon, Ko-Fi, YouTube membership. There's perks for doing that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in whatever the next video is.